Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. New York, JFK International Airport. The terminal buzzed with voices, rolling suitcases, and incessant announcements over the loudspeaker. Michael Thompson, a 32-year-old black father, gently held his 6-month-old daughter, Lily, in his arms. He'd had a long day. He was returning from a business trip to Miami and simply dreamed of being reunited with his wife, Emily, and the rest of his family in California. As he approached the boarding gate, a blonde flight attendant, impeccably dressed and with a stern face, stared at him. Michael immediately sensed an unusual tension. She raised her hand to stop him. "Sir, you cannot board with this child," she said in a cold, almost cutting voice. Michael blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me? I have to catch this flight, my daughter is with me." The flight attendant crossed her arms, ignoring his explanations and the glances of the other passengers who were beginning to turn towards them. "This is non-negotiable," she repeated. A wave of injustice and anger rose within him, but he tried to remain calm. He knew that shouting or losing his temper would only worsen the situation. Yet, deep down, a terrible premonition was taking hold. He wasn't being treated this way for an objective reason, but because of the color of his skin. Around them, passengers murmured, some sympathizing, others averting their eyes. The minutes passed, heavy and silent, and Michael wondered how a simple leg of a family trip could turn into a public humiliation. At that precise moment, he did not yet know that this confrontation would trigger a series of events that would shock not only those present in the terminal, but soon the entire country. Michael stepped back slightly, holding his daughter Lily tightly against him. His eyes shone with worry, but his voice remained calm, almost measured. "Excuse me, but why can't I ride with my daughter?" The flight attendant, Margaret Collins, blonde, her features drawn with excessive rigidity, looked at him as if he were a problem to be solved. "It's company policy. I can't argue." Michael felt his heart sink. He knew the airline's rules. They allowed parents to travel with their children, even very young ones. So it wasn't a question of safety or regulations. There was something else, something he had never encountered before in his life as a traveler. A passenger sitting nearby, a woman in her 40s, whispered to her companion, "She can't be serious." Michael continued, "Please, I'm just a father who wants to join his family. We all have our tickets, everything is in order." Margaret raised an eyebrow, visibly annoyed. "Sir, I told you that was non-negotiable." At that moment, Michael sensed the tension around them. The other passengers' gazes became more attentive. Some leaned forward to observe, others discreetly took out their phones. A murmur of solidarity circulated softly. Several passengers were beginning to understand that this wasn't simply a matter of politics, but an unfair and probably discriminatory attitude. Michael took a deep breath. He knew that giving in to emotion or anger would only make the situation worse. He decided to ask to speak to a supervisor. "Very well," he said calmly but firmly. "Call your supervisor. I want to resolve this properly." Margaret seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if surprised that he would dare question her authority. But she signaled to someone to contact her superior. Meanwhile, Michael felt a strange combination of anxiety and determination. He knew he couldn't give up. Not for himself, not for Lily. And he didn't yet know that this confrontation would reveal a much wider injustice and trigger a reaction that would shock everyone in the terminal. Michael was still holding Lily in his arms, his face marked by fatigue and worry. Around him, the murmur of the passengers became more audible, some whispering among themselves, others discreetly taking out their phones to film the scene. Suddenly, a man in his 30s stepped forward calmly. He wore an elegant suit and exuded an imposing yet serene presence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but composed. "I believe you have the wrong person, madam." Margaret Collins, the hostess, frowned. "Sir, this is none of your business." "Oh, but yes," replied the man, stepping forward. "Everyone here can see that this father is acting correctly. You are simply refusing to allow a passenger and his baby to board without a valid reason. Michael recognized him as Jonathan Parker, a business lawyer he had seen before in the airport terminal. Jonathan continued, "If you don't rectify the situation immediately, I'm afraid your company will face serious consequences." Margaret stiffened, but before she could reply, a supervisor arrived, looking serious. "What's going on here?" he asked, observing the scene. Michael calmly explained the situation, stating that everything was in order for him and his daughter. The supervisor listened attentively, his brow furrowed. Margaret, for her part, tried to maintain her composure, but her arrogance was beginning to crack. The supervisor turned to her. "Margaret, is there a concrete reason to prevent this passenger from boarding?" She hesitated, stammered a few words, then fell silent. The truth dawned: there was no rule that justified her refusal. Her attitude had been motivated by something else, by a personal and discriminatory judgment against Michael and his daughter. Silence fell for a few moments, broken only by the murmurs of the passengers, shocked and sympathetic. Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But he knew the battle wasn't over, justice had to be served and this discrimination exposed. Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder. "You'll be able to board. Everything will be fine." For the first time in several minutes, Michael managed a smile, sensing that the situation might finally turn in his favor. But what he didn't yet know was that what followed would shock the passengers even more and expose Margaret to a public humiliation she would remember for the rest of her life. The supervisor, a man in his 50s with a serious face, took Michael by the arm and led him towards the boarding line. Margaret Collins followed him, visibly upset and red with anger. "Michael Thompson, you are authorized to board immediately with your child," he declared firmly, as several passengers held their breath. At that moment, one of the passengers took out his phone and began filming Margaret, his voice trembling with frustration. "Look at this, she refused a black father and his baby, for no reason." The video spread almost instantly among the terminal passengers, creating a collective murmur. Phones all turned towards her, recording her expressions of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. Margaret tried to protest, "It's not what you think." But no one was listening to him. The passengers now surrounded him, some denouncing his behavior aloud. "This is unacceptable. You're going to lose your job. How could you do this to a baby?" The supervisor, visibly furious at the flight attendant's attitude, made an immediate decision. "Margaret Collins, you are being removed from the flight and we will open an internal investigation into your behavior." Margaret paled, unable to find the words. Her gestures betrayed a mixture of shame and anger. She hadn't anticipated that her discrimination would be exposed so publicly. Michael, holding Lily tightly, felt a wave of relief and pride. He had not only protected his daughter, but he had also exposed an unjust act in front of dozens of witnesses. The passengers applauded him silently, some with tears in their eyes, others smiling with admiration. Jonathan Parker approached Michael. "You have shown courage today. What you have done will have consequences far beyond this terminal." Within minutes, Margaret's video spread across social media. The story went viral, shocking thousands of people across the United States. What began as a personal confrontation transformed into a national symbol against discrimination. Michael and his daughter were finally able to board, but the impact of that day would remain etched in the memory of all who witnessed it. Margaret, for her part, was now confronted with reality. Her arrogance and discrimination had been exposed, and there was no going back. A few days after the incident, Michael Thompson received a call from the airline. The voice on the other end of the line was formal but genuinely sorry. "Mr. Thompson, we wish to offer you our formal apologies for the unacceptable behavior of our employee, Margaret Collins. We have launched an internal investigation and she has been suspended with immediate effect. We would also like to offer you and your family complimentary tickets." Michael felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. He replied calmly but emotionally, "Thank you, it's appreciated, but above all I hope that this kind of situation never happens again." However, the true consequence of the incident far exceeded her expectations. The video of Margaret refusing boarding to a black father and his baby went viral. Local and national media outlets picked up the story, denouncing her discriminatory behavior and highlighting Michael's courage. Margaret faced public scrutiny. Her colleagues now viewed her with suspicion, and her reputation quickly crumbled. The relentless social media became the tribunal where she was judged and condemned to humiliation and public condemnation. She ultimately lost her job, unable to justify her behavior to the company or the public. For his part, Michael became a symbol of dignity and courage. Articles, videos, and interviews highlighted his patience and composure in the face of injustice. His family, his wife Emily and daughter Lily, welcomed him with emotion at Los Angeles Airport, surrounded by public acclaim and widespread admiration. Ultimately, what had begun as a humiliating incident in a crowded terminal transformed into a clear and powerful message: discrimination will not go unpunished, and human dignity always triumphs when one dares to stand up for oneself. Michael smiled, holding Lily close, aware that beyond this personal victory, he had helped inspire thousands of people never to accept injustice.